Operations Committee. I'd like to remind everybody that the meeting is being broadcast via the internet. I'd like to announce that our board chair, who serves as ex officio on all committees, will today be serving as a member of the Agency Operations Committee. As you know, we have several vacancies on the board. In order to fulfill quorum requirements today, the board chair will be serving in a voting capacity. This action is allowed under current board rules. First action item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the July 24th, 2013 Agency Operations Committee meeting. These minutes were sent to members for review on October 10th. Any questions or corrections to the minutes?
Motion approved.
Have a motion? Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Item number 3. For the next agenda item, I'd like to call on Dr. Alonzo to introduce the topics for the meeting's reports. He'll provide us some background information, introduce the other presenters. There is no action required on this item. Dr. Alonzo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that, before I get started on the reports, that I wanted to make mention of is that on the materials that you have before you, the list of the list of the committee and the list of the board members may not reflect the current composition of the board. Let me just assure you that this is an act of efficiency, not of incompetency. We are trying to save paper and not reprint the agenda items with the new committees or the new chairs. But be assured that we are aware of that. We have 2 reports today under agenda item number 3. I will briefly present item A, which is the quarterly financial report. Then Mark Pell and I will present the report on compliance monitoring efforts. Item 3A is the standing quarterly financial report that was sent to you 2 weeks ago with the agenda material. Today's report is as of August 31st, 2013. And this represents the ending balances for appropriation year 13. For your convenience, we have also, I believe we have placed a copy at your places, or we have not? We have. Okay. In case you did not bring the one that we sent you. This report shows that we finished the AY, the appropriation year, on track and expended funds as appropriated. Since our last financial report, we closely managed the budget at the agency level to ensure that funds are spent, encumbered, or, if allowed, carried forward to the next biennium. As is customary at this time of the fiscal year, we look very closely at the potential balances and we make transfers that we can within our 20% transfer authority. The report that you have before you is before the transfer, so you may see some balances on there and may wonder why those balances are on there. Those are the ones that we manage in the last quarter, and since then we have made those transfers, so they have been transferred to other strategies where they can be used. And they have been made, but they were in September, so they're not reflected on there. The second reason why you see some unspent balances in this report is because the financial report that you have before you include, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, includes $81.4 million of additional funds that were appropriated by House Bill 1025, the so-called supplemental appropriation for FY13. Supplemental appropriations were made for graduate medical education, family practice, the Hazelwood exemption, and the TRIP program. We either encumbered or we were able to carry forward this fund, so that's why they show up there. Mr. Chairman and members, staff and I would be glad to respond to any questions that you have on the financial report.
Any questions?
Thank you. Agenda item number 3B is the report on compliance monitoring. As you know, the compliance monitoring efforts are being transitioned to the Office of Internal Audit and Compliance Monitoring under the direction of Mark Pell. At the July meeting of this committee, a compliance monitoring plan for FY14 was presented. The plan took into consideration the expansion of compliance monitoring from 2 specialists to 4, in accordance with the funding and the FTE increases that were provided by the legislature. Mark is in the process of filling the 2 additional compliance monitoring specialist positions. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we,
Um,
item 3B
Is there a handout?
for a handout.
Only the second part of the report, which we will get to. So this is just information. Yeah, no, we don't have that. He's in the process of filling those 2 additional compliance monitoring specialists, and we hope to have him on board early November. So we're almost there. He's available if you have any specific questions on the hiring process or any of the other activities. Also, you may recall that Senate Bill 215 requires that the coordinating board engage in negotiated rulemaking to develop the rules for compliance monitoring. Working with Linda Battles, who is leading our initiative on negotiated rulemaking, we are proceeding with this initiative. The notice of intent was posted on the Texas Register, and we received nominations for participation in the negotiated rulemaking, specifically for compliance monitoring, from 69 individuals. We recommended a pool of 26 and have communicated with them about our intent to ask them to serve on the committee to come up with a negotiated rulemaking. The list of potential stakeholders that will participate in negotiating rulemaking for compliance monitoring has been posted as required for final comments. We have also selected the 2 staff members who will act as facilitators for this negotiated rulemaking, and we have arranged for training at the end of October and the beginning of November. We plan to convene the group soon thereafter and go through the process of negotiating rulemaking. Our plans are to bring you the results of that process to the January 2014 meeting for adoption by this committee and the full board. I will be pleased to respond to any questions on this part of the compliance monitoring report or our compliance monitoring efforts.
Questions?
So the people who are nominated are just citizens and nominated by generally colleges, universities?
Yes, they can nominate themselves if they express an interest. Most of them are associated with our institutions of higher ed, but they don't have to be necessarily only from the institutions. But that's where most of that pool came from.
The length of service would be?
A day or 2, I hope. Maybe no more than a day. So we don't think that this one will take that much, or that long, rather.
Other Chairman.
Mark, the 2 compliance folks, that was recommended by the Sunset. Is that correct, to beef that area up?
That's correct. Actually, they recommended 4 in total, and the agency got an early start and hired 2 before the sunset process was even completed. So this actually bringing 2 more on board will get us up to the 4 that they recommended.
Okay. So we're in compliance or whatever with those recommendations?
Yes.
Okay.
Well on our way. For the second part of the compliance monitoring report, I now turn it over to Mark for any additional information and for a report on one of our institutions of higher ed. Mark.
Thanks, Arturo. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members. Your agenda packet, if you'll turn to agenda item, it's labeled as 3C, and I think that's where some of this confusion, it's actually going to be included as a part of Dr. Alonzo's report on compliance monitoring, continuation of that discussion. We issued 1 compliance monitoring report during the period. It was a review of TEG compliance at Hardin-Simmons University, and that was a clean report. The compliance team found no reportable observations in its review, and that report is included in your packet of materials. Other compliance monitoring activities continue to move forward, and we're excited about the growth of this function, which we were just talking about. I listed some of our key activities in your materials, and I'll hit the highlights with you. As Arturo just mentioned to you, we're nearing completion of the hiring process, and I hope to have 2 new compliance specialists on board early to mid-November at the latest. So we'll begin the training process and actually getting the specialists in a review mode and out providing the coverage across the state at all of our institutions of higher education. So we're excited about those prospects. We're also continuing to improve the quality assurance processes over this function. This is a relatively new function. It just recently transferred under my guidance, and in doing so, we're going to actually hold this function in compliance with government auditing standards. And the reason for that, I guess, is really related back to some stakeholder questions during the sunset process about sort of who would review the compliance monitoring function if that function reported directly to me. So in response to that, and really tied in with the peer review that was conducted of our function earlier this year, what we're doing is holding the compliance function accountable to government auditing standards, which would then require that they receive an external peer review periodically. And so in electing those standards, we're basically bringing in the oversight as a matter of following those standards. So we feel very positive about where we're at with compliance monitoring. You have the one report from the period. The materials that you have, we're continuing to move forward. So because of the early submission of the materials, we're already have site visits scheduled for South Texas College. The one that's listed in your materials as a TBD is now Austin College, and we have a site visit scheduled for there as well. So things are progressing well. I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Questions for Mark?
Mr. Chairman. Mark, the peer reviews, is that another state agency that would do the peer review, or how does that work?
It's actually probably going to be not going to be another state agency. It would be subject to the same set of considerations as what we went through with the peer review for internal audit.
Okay.
So there are external service providers for that, other public accounting firms. So there's some choices there. I guess it's scalable depending on how much the agency wants to spend, basically.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. Anything else to add to that?
All right. Unless there's any other questions, that completes our report on compliance monitoring, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. As we stated earlier, just simply a no action required, just an update. Item number 4, agency operations. Agenda item 4A is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee to adopt the proposed Agency Operations Committee charter. Dr. Alonzo and Mark Hale will present this to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item requests the committee to formally adopt the Agency Operations Committee charter. This charter came about as a result of the internal audit peer review that Mark was just talking about, that was conducted last spring and presented to this committee in July by that third-party reviewer. One of the recommendations that they came up with, among others, was that the committee adopts a charter that will outline the purpose, the authority, the composition, and the responsibility of the Agency Operations Committee. The peer review felt that such a charter will provide some structure to the committee and help guide the committee in fulfilling its responsibilities. At that July meeting, you instructed staff to develop the charter, bring it back to this meeting for formal adoption. And working with our General Counsel and others, the results of this effort is the proposed charter that we have included in your materials. In my estimation, it is pretty straightforward, and we recommend adoptions. But Mark and I and Bill France are here and available to answer any questions that you may have about the proposed charter that we have before you.
Any questions for Dr. Alonzo or Mark?
Will this add any additional work that you can highlight for us that we haven't done in the past?
I don't think so, but Mark.
No, I think it actually just really formalizes the activities that the committee is already undertaking.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mark, and maybe Alonzo, was this developed using some standard of internal audit, or?
Actually, the beginning of the process, sort of the baseline for developing this, was a model charter that came from the Institute of Internal Auditors. So it was the governing association for internal auditors that we used as the basis for tailoring it then to this committee.
Okay. And you said it was developed from the model. Are there any significant deviations from that model that we need to be aware of?
Not to my recollection, and certainly, Bill, you can feel free to chime in. I think there were certain things that were probably removed from the document in order so that we wouldn't have any conflicts with other board rules.
Okay.
But other than that, I think no.
Harold, one of the things, just to kind of put it in context, is that most governing boards have a audit committee. We do not, because this committee serves as the audit committee. So this is really where the genesis of that comes from.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, I just noticed on a few of these there is a time set annually, but on many of them it just says we'll review, we'll audit, we'll consider. So I'm just wondering, do we need to have a time period set quarterly, whatever it is on these, or is that too specific?
We could certainly we could develop, I guess, a timeline type of document. I think the activities that are discussed here, and perhaps the timeline is not specified in this document, but those activities are occurring throughout the year, and so I guess I would say they're predictable, and we could, specify to you.
Maybe instead of specifying those things in the charter, maybe there could be a schedule that you could provide.
And that's probably realistic. I'm just thinking as a board member coming in, not really knowing what to expect and what you need to do to be compliant. I really didn't know, the baseline. So I work in an organization that struggles to make sure we get all of our deadlines done. So, and sometimes things just slip by, and
Certainly.
Unless you have it really, like you said, a timeline that keeps you on schedule. I didn't know if this was the place to have it or not.
I think a supplemental schedule would serve well for that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Move to approve with the charter along with the supplemental schedule to be
Stipulated
provided to
schedule.
AOC.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 4B, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee related to amendments to Chapter 1, Agency Administration, Subchapter A, Section 1.6, Advisory Committees, SB 215, 83rd Texas Legislature Regular Session. Linda Battles will present this item to the committee.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'll be working off of the supplemental agenda materials, which is the yellow cover sheet, agenda item 4B. So our sunset legislation, Senate Bill 215, requires the board to adopt rules for the administration of all of our advisory committees. You may recall that the results of our sunset review, sunset staff found that we were in non-compliant with some of the statutes related to our governing our advisory committees, and we didn't have in place formal rules for all of the advisory committees that we had in existence. We did have them for statutorily created advisory committees, but not for the ones that were created by staff or the commissioner. For some of the advisory committees, we didn't have a presiding officer. For example, we had staff serving as facilitators for meetings, but not an official presiding officer. We did have a few of the advisory committees that reported their recommendations directly to the board, such as the formula advisory committees, but not all of them came before you to present their recommendations directly to you. And we had several, or a few, actually two advisory committees that our board chair and vice chair served as members, one being the Council on Continuous Improvement and Innovation. And we also did not regularly assess the costs and the usefulness of these advisory committees as required by statute. So, and these rules that we're presenting to you today will fix all of those issues and bring us into compliance with Senate Bill 215. In consultation with Sunset staff regarding best practices of other state agencies and how they do their rules on advisory committees, Sunset staff advised having both a general set of rules that would generally apply to all of our advisory committees and then also have individual advisory committee rules. So that is what we've done. So on the next agenda item, you will be considering rules for 12 specific advisory committees. The rules under this agenda item apply generally to all the board advisory committees and include but are not limited to the following provisions. They specify that the board appoints the committee members and the committees as opposed to the commissioner. They require compliance with the provisions of Texas Government Code Chapter 2110, regulating advisory committees. They stipulate that advisory committees cannot consist of more than 24 members. We actually had one committee that was 25 members, so that was in noncompliance with statute. They prohibit board members from serving on advisory committees. They require advisory committees to report recommendations directly to the board, and then each advisory committee is required to submit a report to the board so that the board can properly evaluate the committee's work, usefulness, and costs related to having that advisory committee in existence. These rules were published in the Texas Register for public comment September 20th, and the 30-day comment expired on Sunday, which explains why we just got these materials to you yesterday, so I apologize for that late notice. We did receive a total of 5 comments for these particular rules, all of which were submitted via a joint letter of 6 university systems and 3 non-system universities. And what you can see in the white pages is wherever you see in red font is where we adjusted the rules in response to the public comments. There was one comment that we staff did not concur with, and that had to do with removing sections related to presiding officer, manner of reporting, and subcommittees. Each of these sections are in the individual committee rules, and they felt that it was unnecessary to repeat in each individual committee rule since it's in the general rules. But staff felt that we needed to retain those provisions in each of the individual committee rules for a couple of reasons. One, the manner of reporting we thought was important to keep in the individual rules just because of the noncompliance in the past with these reports, and we just wanted to make sure that we promoted that compliance by having them in each individual committee rules. And then the other one related to presiding officer. Each committee has the option to come up with a co-chair, and we want to make sure that's spelled out in the individual committee's rules. So we didn't see any harm with keeping these sections in the individual committee rules, so we just left them in there. But everything else we accepted, so if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions for Linda? Motion?
A second, but I do have a
Motion,
question.
second discussion. Yes, sir.
Linda, on the item, the comment concerning manner of reporting, there was some question as to whether there should be an annual report if it was a 2-year cycle.
No, they agreed with they felt that these were good provisions, but they're included in these general provisions, and they didn't see the need to have them spelled out, repeated in the individual committee rules, which you're going to consider next.
Okay.
But we didn't see a harm in retaining them just to ensure that everybody complies with it.
But my question had more to do that if it's a 2-year cycle.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Even a year into it, could we not have some sort of interim comment as to how?
It does have annual and biannual reports. They asked us to go ahead and include a biannual report if that particular committee doesn't meet as often as a committee that could report annually on its work. So we accepted that, and we included annual and biannual.
Other questions? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item 4C, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the new rules for Chapter 1 Agency Administration regarding advisory committees. It's a fairly lengthy list, so please take a moment to look over the various rules that are to be considered rather than me reading them to you one by one. And then Linda Battles will present this item to the committee.
And I apologize for the length of the caption, but we thought it would be more efficient to bring one agenda item as opposed to 12 separate agenda items.
We appreciate that.
So these proposed rules specify the purpose, composition, duration, meetings, tasks, and reporting requirements for each individual advisory committee. The rules were published in the September 20th issue of the Texas Register with an ending comment period of Sunday, the 20th of October. We received a total of 21 comments concerning 9 advisory committees. The 3 advisory committees that we received no comments on included the Family Practice Residency, Financial Aid, and Formula Advisory Committee for Community and Technical Colleges. But we did receive some comments on the rest of them. We did receive a joint letter from the 6 university systems and 3 non-system universities, a joint letter from the 4 health science centers, and individual comments from the University of Texas at Austin, the independent colleges and universities of Texas, and the University of Phoenix. Staff concurred with most of the comments. The staff accepted and consequently incorporated into the proposed rules that are noted in red font include but aren't limited to the following. First, tying the definition of public and private institutions of higher education to the statutory definition, specifying committee members' terms as 3-year staggered terms, which staff agreed to but modified slightly to include the language up to 3-year staggered terms, allowing for committees to organize into both subcommittees and work groups, not just subcommittees, and deleting language relating to specific issues for the committee to consider, given that the tasks of the committee were already spelled out in the rules. The comments that staff did not agree with relate specifically to the Formula Advisory Committee for General Academic Institutions and the health-related institutions. The universities and health science centers that submitted comments suggested that since the statutory language related to the Formula Advisory Committees does not specify that the board provide recommendations of the appropriate funding levels necessary to achieve the state's goals, they felt that those rules should be more reflective of legislative intent and suggested deleting that language. Our staff, on the other hand, disagreed with that comment because the statutes certainly necessarily imply that the board provide the funding levels to the governor and the LBB for their use. So we retained that language. That pretty much sums up those rules. So if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Questions for Linda?
Move to approve.
Have a motion. Second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item 4D, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the amendments of Chapter 4, 6, 9, and 13 regarding advisory committees. As we just did, please take a moment to look over the various amendments rather than having me list them to you one by one, and we'll consider them after you've had a moment to look at them.
And in an effort to relocate our advisory committee rules in a central location in our rules, which is Chapter 1, we have to make some conforming changes in our, in the other sections of our rules where we mention these advisory committees. So that's basically what this does.
Move to approve.
Motion. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item 4E, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the appointment of individuals to serve on the Apply Texas Advisory Committee for a term of 2 years. Linda Battles will present this item to the committee. Linda.
Thank you. The Apply Texas Advisory Committee provides the board with advice and recommendations on changes that may be needed to the common admission application, which is utilized by our public and private colleges and universities and community colleges and universities. Since you just adopted the rules related to the appointment of our members, we need to get board approval on this. And typically, these appointments would go to the Committee on Academic Workforce and Success. But because we have several meetings of these 4 committees coming up next month, and then one later in January, we needed to get the board's approval. This was our last opportunity to do that. So that's why it's coming before the Agency Operations Committee. But in the future, it'll go through the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. And the Financial Aid Advisory Committees, which we don't have any appointments, will go to CAP, the Affordability, Accountability, and Planning Committee.
Have all of these people already agreed to serve?
They have been notified, and the letter that we sent to them explained that their appointment is contingent on the board's confirmation, and so that way we could at least get the meetings on their calendars and start working with them.
Is this the entire committee? There's not some already on the committee and you're just adding these, or?
I can't remember on this particular one if there are some still on the committee and these are just cycling off of their term, but I can get that information for you.
Is there staff on this committee too? Or staff?
There are staffs who support the
assist?
committee.
Yeah. Okay. I move to adopt.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item 4F, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee related to the appointment of members to the Learning Technology Advisory Committee, LTAC. Linda Battles will present this to the committee. Linda.
The LTAC provides the board with advice and recommendations regarding the role that learning technology plays in Texas higher education. So same issue here. They have a meeting coming up and we need to get your approval on these appointments.
And Our Lady of the Lake is an independent school,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Okay.
Questions for Linda?
Move to appoint these members.
Have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Agenda item 4G, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee related to the appointment of members to the Lower Division Academic Course Guide Manual, ACGM, Advisory Committee. Linda Battles will present this item. Linda?
This advisory committee provides the board with advice and recommendations regarding new disciplines of study, developments within existing disciplines, represented by courses in the manual, and obsolescence of disciplines of study and courses. Same situation here, and we ask for your approval.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item 4H, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the appointment of members to the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee, UEAC. Linda Battles will present this to the committee. Linda?
We usually call it UEAC.
That again?
UEAC.
UEAC. Okay.
So this committee provides the board with advice and recommendations regarding undergraduate education. Pretty broad. But we, same situation here, and ask for your approval.
Any questions for Linda?
Well, I do. And so some of the committees have some independent schools representing, and some don't.
Yes.
So is that on purpose, or do you
It depends on the subject matter that the committee is considering. So if it certainly the deliberations or recommendations will impact the private and independent colleges and universities, they will have representation on the committee. So in this case, there are independent institutions. There's 1 to 3 members that serve on the committee.
Which one is Texarkana College? Is that an independent school?
No, that's public. So this isn't the full committee. We must have other members who are currently serving.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I can get you a full list if you'd like.
That's
It's
fine.
just replacements for the ones
Those who
rolling
have
off.
cycled off.
Cycled up. Okay.
Other questions?
Move to approve.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 4I, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee related to the proposed amendment to Chapter 1, Agency Administration, Subchapter A, General Provisions, Section 1.14 of the Board Rules concerning negotiated rulemaking. Linda Battles will present this to the committee. Linda?
Thank you. So I'm going to be referring to the supplemental agenda materials. Senate Bill 215 requires a board to engage in negotiated rulemaking when adopting policies, procedures, or rules relating to certain matters. And Senate Bill 215 does spell out what those matters are. Negotiated rulemaking is a process established in the Texas Government Code in which representatives from a government agency and affected interest groups negotiate the terms of a proposed administrative rule. Negotiated rulemaking has been authorized in Texas statutes since 1997, and the coordinating board has actually had rules authorizing the agency to engage in negotiated rulemaking since 2004. It's not a process that is typically used by state agencies. It's used very well, or commonly in the federal government. But we are in the process of beginning these negotiated rulemaking process in 4 subject areas. You heard about one of them earlier from Dr. Alonso on compliance monitoring. We're also charged in Senate Bill 215 to conduct negotiated rulemaking in the allocation methodologies of our financial aid programs and other trust seed funds. So we decided to start with some relatively easy rules. So we're starting with tuition equalization grants, beyond time, the funds that specifically go to private and independent colleges and universities, and then Texas College Work Study, and then, of course, compliance monitoring. So those are the 4 committees that we are working on. We submitted a survey to all of the presidents and chancellors of the institutions in Texas, and we asked them to either participate on the committee themselves or designate somebody that they would like to nominate to participate. And we received those responses and went through and tried to get good representation on each of the committees. We have submitted those names to the Texas Register, and that will get published in the October 25th publication for 10 days. So the public can respond to the names that we've selected to serve on these committees, and they can either submit changes, other names, or remove anybody from that list, and we'll look at those comments and make a determination. And then we will start, hopefully, in the 2nd and 3rd week of November with meetings. We don't anticipate these meetings going very long. As Dr. Alonso said, we don't anticipate more than a day. For compliance monitoring, we think the TEG and the Beyond Time can be done on the same day, hopefully one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So we purposely chose committee members that are the same committee members for each of those committees so that we minimize travel on those who are participating. And hopefully come to you in January for those rules. So the rules that are before you were submitted to the Texas Register, were published on September 20th, and the public comment period ended on Sunday. We received, and I should also mention that before we even published the rules with the Texas Register, I have to thank Bill Franz because he's actually the one who drafted the rules and shared them with his counterparts at the institutions and got some really good feedback that he was able to incorporate into the rules prior to even sending them to the Texas Register. So we did get 2 comments during the public comment period. One of the comments was, and staff agreed with it, related to the costs of participating in negotiated rulemaking, and to clarify that those costs are borne equally by the participating entities rather than the representatives of those entities. So when we were contemplating how we were going to approach negotiated rulemaking, we actually looked into hiring an outside consultant to serve as a facilitator for these. Unfortunately, it came back too cost prohibitive. So that's why we identified staff inside the agency to get trained and to be able to do the facilitation. Now, the staff members who have been chosen for these particular committees have nothing to do with the subject matter. They don't work in the division. They don't work on a daily basis with the issue at all. So we think that was a more cost-effective approach. That doesn't mean that we're not going to, perhaps if there is an issue that comes that is highly visible, highly contentious, potentially contentious, that we wouldn't want to seek maybe somebody from the State Office of Administrative Hearings to serve as a facilitator, and in that case, that's when we would have some cost sharing with the participants. And that's what these rules allow for. The second comment that we received suggested replacing the title of the commissioner in every instance in the rules with the board. And they felt that since Senate Bill 215 gives the board the responsibility for engaging in negotiated rulemaking, that it would be appropriate for us to refer to the board in the rules. They did acknowledge, however, that the board may delegate these responsibilities to the commissioner. So the staff concurred with the suggested modifications, and we also, after consulting with the commissioner, replaced the title, the commissioner, in some of these instances with the alternative dispute resolution coordinator. That happens to be me. I've been serving in that role since 2004.
What was that again?
Resolution coordinator.
Alternative dispute resolution coordinator.
Wow.
So back in 2004, I was appointed to this position. I never really had to do anything before. Just it was very rare occasion that I had to. Now I'm inundated with this, so it's been interesting.
Resolution coordinator.
But the commissioner felt when we were going through the process that because there is a potential that there is no consensus that is reached by a committee. The rules say that if this happens, the board ultimately has the authority to determine whether to proceed with the proposed rules and potentially delegate that decision to the commissioner. And because of this, the commissioner felt that he shouldn't be in a position to decide who should serve on the committee up front. So it was his suggestion that we go ahead and have the ADR coordinator be responsible for that. So if you have any questions about the rules of the process, happy to answer.
Questions for Lyndon?
So this negotiated rule making, I mean, it's a lengthy, drawn-out process.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think...
So you're not going to decide anything quick?
No.
It's going to...
No.
Okay.
And
we're going to make such persuasive arguments about our position that people will immediately concur.
Yeah.
We will have one staff member as a member of the committee, of each negotiated rulemaking committee. So we will be represented on the committee. And it'll be up to the committee to decide how they want to define consensus. It could be a unanimous consensus. It could be majority consensus. They will decide that on in their first meeting, how they want to define that. They will also decide whether or not to accept the facilitator that I've appointed for that particular committee, and so forth. So.
But at the end of the day, if I understood you correctly, a decision has to be made whether the committee has come to a conclusion or not.
Right. And if they cannot come to a consensus, then ultimately it lies with the board and how you want to proceed. If you want to go ahead and proceed with the rules as they are or do something different, it will be up to you.
Well, that's great. We'll get to make somebody mad one way or the other. Okay.
Other questions? Have a motion to
approve.
Have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 5, auditing. Linda, thank you very much. Great job.
Our alternative
Dispute resolution coordinator. Sorry that doesn't come with a big pay increase.
Mr. Chairman, but she has requested that we refer to her from now on as Your Honor.
Your Honor. You've got it. Sorry. Agenda item 5A.
Judge Linda.
Judge Linda. Agenda item 5A. Update on internal audit reports. This item is a report item only, does not require action of the committee. Mark Pale will present this. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an informational item to bring you up to date on internal audit reports issued during the reporting period. And then there will be a separate item to brief you on one external audit report that was issued during the period. We issued one report and closed one investigation after getting some additional information from the State Auditor's Office. The report that was issued is included in your materials, and it's we considered it to be a Category 1 report. It was a review of the Higher Education Almanac and Performance Reporting process. And we really worked closely on this particular project with Dr. Gardner and his team, and we looked at the process that was used to produce the Higher Education Almanac. And you'll see from the report there were 3 recommendations. They're detailed on page 3 of the report that you have before you, and really felt like these recommendations would further strengthen what was really an already strong performance reporting process. That is, those 2 items were the only finalization of audit reports during the period, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Any questions for Mark? Okay. Agenda item number 5B, update on internal audit activities. This item is also just a report, does not require committee actions. Mark?
Thank you. This is an informational briefing on internal audit activities that occurred during the period. Your agenda materials show a synopsis of our work in progress, and this is, as I'm sure you understand, a moving target. For instance, the College Work Study and the Sunset Implementation projects that are shown in the table, those are actually both now in the reporting stage, and those will be brought before you at the January AOC meeting. In the interest of time, I'll skip down the page to an item that I think you'll find of interest, the performance measures, last bullet on the list there. There's 2 attachments that we included in your materials. Those really give you a view of the things that we use within internal audit to assess ourselves, and that self-assessment process is part of what our auditing standards require. So you'll see that the first attachment gives an assessment of our performance measures from last fiscal year 13. And then the second attachment shows you the performance measures, the same set of performance measures, and then we've expanded that list to include 3 additional things that we'll be evaluating for this current fiscal year at the end of FY14. I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Questions? Like you're thinking of a question.
There's no action required.
You're just looking. Okay.
I'm impressed.
Okay.
Good job.
Thank you.
Item number 5C, annual report of audit activities fiscal year 2013. Again, this is just a report, does not require committee actions. Mark Hill will present this item as well. Mark?
Thank you. This is once again an informational item. This is a compilation of our audit activities for FY13. And the reason that we do this is it's a requirement of state law. The Texas Internal Auditing Act requires that we produce an annual report, and the format is actually prescribed by the Texas State Auditor's Office. The report is included in your materials, and as I said, it follows the format that's prescribed. I guess the thing that I would point out to the committee is that the information that's contained within this annual report has already come before you during the year. There's no new information in there. There's audit reports issued during the year, the audit plan that the committee approved during the year, our external peer review that was previously brought before you. So this just compiles all that so that we can get it submitted as required by state law.
Mark, was this, it was subsequent to this issuance, didn't we have a teleconference or with the auditor? Was that what I recall?
I believe what you're referring to is the external peer review that was presented back in July, correct? And that report is included in this material.
Questions? Okay, this is a report only. Last item for Mark will be the final report, the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts post-payment audit of certain payroll purchase and travel transactions of the Higher Education Coordinating Board. Again, this is only a report and does not require committee action. Mark Hale will present this item. Mark.
Thank you. This is, again, an informational item. This is a post-payment audit report. It was issued on August 30th, and you have the report before you. Along with the agency's corrective action plan to address the issues that were noted by the State Comptroller's Office audit team that performed the engagement. Really, in essence, this audit took a very detailed look at the agency's expenditures, and they reviewed those expenditures against the Comptroller's payment guidelines to make sure that we're compliant with state laws and policies. This project is conducted periodically by that group, and our agency was last reviewed in 2009. For this particular engagement this year, the auditors reported 5 findings in the current review, and I would like to put those 5 findings into some perspective for you and ask that you consider the following factors. The first is that, as noted on page 3 of the report executive summary, there were no recurring audit issues, which I think is important in terms of the control environment of the agency, that previously reported conditions have been addressed. Secondly, I would say that the noted issues, while important, are monetarily very small in relation to the population of over $28 million in expenditures that the auditors reviewed in their project. Thirdly, the one issue that's potentially the most significant and that might get your attention is related to segregation of duties over expenditure processing. But it's important to note that that particular issue is only valid in the context of using hard copy or paper vouchers, and the agency discontinued the use of those hard copy vouchers a number of years ago. So a fix has been put in place, but really the condition that was cited was related to an operational practice that has not been conducted for a number of years. And then lastly, as you can see from the first pages of your materials there with the corrective action plan, by the dates that you see on that plan, the issues have been promptly addressed, and fixes have been put in place for the the items that the auditors noted. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Questions for Mark? Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item 5E, discussion and consideration of a course of action regarding external auditors for the agency-wide financials. This is an action item. Arturo Alonso will present this item. Dr. Alonso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Our final agenda item for the afternoon is 5E, course of action regarding the external auditors for the agency-wide financial audit. If this item appears familiar to you, it is because it is very similar to the discussion, and in fact, it may be the same discussion that we had, or that this committee had at the July committee meeting. At that meeting, if you will recall, staff was asked to present information on the requirements or on best practices on whether the board should exercise its option to renew the existing contract with KPMG for the remaining 2 years of the current contract, or whether the board should engage in a competitive solicitation to find another firm. You will also recall that you had a very vigorous discussion, a lot of questions, but no vote was taken at that meeting, as it was presented as an informational item only. Subsequent to that discussion, and also you might recall that the then chair of the committee, Munir Lalani, was absent due to illness. Subsequent to that discussion, to that meeting, I had a telephone conversation with him and briefed him on what the questions were, what the direction of the conversation was, and so forth. But he asked that we bring this item to the October meeting for a formal vote and for full board approval. Your agenda item in your book right now consists or contains the same background material that we presented to you in July. Some of the research that Mark did on the best practices and some of the guidance that we have, you have that in there. We also, again, included the timeline of how we have gotten to this point over the last 6 or 7 years, and it bears pointing out that we have had 3 competitive solicitations. So it's not like we hired the auditors and kept them for 6 or 7 years. We've actually gone out 3 times on competitive solicitation. So what is different in this agenda item from the July board meeting is that we provide you with 3 options that are available to the committee on the course of action on this issue. We ask you, and at that time the then chair asked that we present those options and that we get the guidance from the committee and subsequent from the board tomorrow. Mark and I are available to summarize the information or recap it if you need us to, and we will be glad to respond to any questions.
Committee members, questions?
So you're not coming to us with a clear recommendation?
We are coming to you for a recommendation, for a vote.
Okay.
We would be glad to weigh in if you have any questions.
Just looking at the timeline, I mean, it goes back a long ways, but in 2011, we issued an RFQ.
Yes.
And
That's correct.
And KPMG at that time was
The best.
okay.
The best.
And that was for what period of time?
It was for
1 year?
No, well, it was for 1 year with the option to renew 4 times.
Okay.
And there are 2 remaining options left. And so the discussion was what?
I move that we approve the 1 year option. If we've got 2 years left, right?
We have, yeah, so the options that you have for today's action is to extend the contract for 1 year, to extend it for 2 years, which is what's left on the contract, or to solicit a new competitive solicitation.
So your motion is 1 year and then do a competitive bid?
Well, if I'm understanding it, we can do it for a year and we still have an additional year that we could approve?
Yes, or you could approve that option today and let us go forth for the next 2 years with the current contract.
Are there any particular benefits to renew for 2 years? Do we get a cut rate deal for doing it 2 years?
No,
So that we-
no, if we go with your motion, Harold, and we certainly will comply with the wishes of the board, then next year, we bring this back to you for the final option, or the final exercise of the option.
Okay, I was just making sure that, so it's a 2-year contract, we can just come back and evaluate it next year if it's approved now, right? If 1 year is approved now. Like
Sure.
the chairman said.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
We don't have to go out for an
Right.
RFQ.
We do not have to
We
go
have
out
one
for an
more.
RFQ, that's right.
Well, I want to backtrack just a little bit. Wasn't the conversation about, is it always so good to use the same audit company? And so I want to hear what Mark has to say. Industry-wide, is it time to just go to a different company, just have different eyes? We've always had similar people still looking at us. I think they brought in one new person this last year, didn't they, who had never reviewed us before, but generally we've had the same team.
Yes, I think the team may vary slightly from year to year. That's a fair question. That's a straightforward question with an unfortunately somewhat convoluted answer. It really it's sort of a fresh look. Perspective is one side of the argument, and the other side of the argument is an informed look. And so there's a lot of debate in the profession as to whether or not which one of those provides more value. And I think you can also argue that you can still achieve a somewhat fresh look that's also informed. I don't know that those have to be two different categories. I think the mandatory rotation aspect, and I think that might have been what our previous AOC chair might have been more familiar with that relates to SEC regulated entities, and so that was done in response to Enron and WorldCom
Right.
and things like that, where the auditors got too close
Right.
to the agency that they were auditing. In this particular case, because we've been through 3 competitive solicitations during this time period that we're presenting here, there certainly has been an opportunity for other firms to have been selected, and on the flip side of that, there's been, I think, benefit achieved by this agency and by the board in realizing some monetary savings in having a firm that's conducting this work that is also doing the A133 work for the state auditor's office, so they're able to kind of leverage some of their other work, and that's resulted in a fairly good amount of savings that they're able to pass along for their audit services. So there is an evaluation process in place. Every year we get asked whether or not, by the state auditor's office, whether or not their contractor KPMG is performing good audit work.
Well, here's another question. They obviously don't do every agency in town. Who does HHCS? I mean, Health and Human Services. That's a big agency, lots and lots of dollars. Who does that one?
Many agencies don't have a separate standalone financial audit
Well,
performed.
the coordinating board didn't prior to 2006. did it?
Right.
Sorry to hear
We're
that.
not required to have. We're not even required to have an outside audit.
Right.
But we've learned a lot from having an outside audit. Let's just make that really
Agree.
clear. It's been a very positive thing. I think we should congratulate Arturo on his
Agreed.
motions to, moving moving the agency that way. But I kind of feel like there are probably other companies in town who could still do a good job and understand state agencies, right? Or they just never give us a good bid. Is that it?
Well, I think there are other qualified service providers out there. I think that typically those providers are going to be on more of a national level. They're going to be the bigger public accounting firms that have the resources and that also have the background in working with nonprofit or government sector entities, as is our case. So So I don't know that the mom and pop firms would necessarily have the resources to bring to
No.
the table to be able to conduct
the
this kind of work,
experience.
right? Or the
Right.
experience. But there are other providers of the service, and those entities have bid in previous years.
I know there isn't really a norm in the industry, but is 7 years, you think, a long time, or is that, of having the same auditor, is that, typical? Do you know?
I don't know that that is unusual for a government sector environment. I think that there's a lot of entities right now that are giving consideration to this issue. It periodically comes up in the news when you hear about the PCAOB and what they're considering, and they've come back to the table a couple of times trying to potentially prescribe, I guess, more stringent guidance in this area, but each time it seems like that kind of gets beat back, and I think there's enough questions about if it was a clear-cut case that certainly if you rotate, then you're going to get a better audit service. I think they would have come out with something more stringent some time ago, but I think that it's sort of the jury's still out, and so because of that, you see a lot of variation in practice.
Well, Mark, KPMG is one of the largest accounting firms in the world, right?
Yes, sir.
Is the audit that they do for the coordinating board, do they have a peer review on, is it spot audits that they have peer reviews on, or would someone else be looking in their peer group be looking at this audit?
Their firm is subject to peer review, so
Right.
so this audit would be part of the universe of audits that would be potentially selected for,
But it may or may
indefinite-
not be.
Correct.
Is it?
Correct.
Is there any reason, Arturo, Mark, why we would question the validity of an audit that KPMG did?
I have no reason. And my experience has been nothing but professional, and they have been fair, tough but fair, and so I have.
We want them tough.
Yeah, we want them tough. That's right.
good.
Yeah, that's, tough is good. But no, there's no reason.
I'm with the commissioner. I think we should say if they'll give us a good deal for 2 years, and then if not, let's do 1 year and then put it out for bid again. So
I should also say, in my experience with KPMG, they have been very professional. I've watched, I've thought about them slacking off because they've done it so many years in a row, and I haven't seen any indication of that.
And there is a cost of doing business on our side when we change. Those of us that go through it in our businesses, it's
Right.
painful.
Right.
Pretty painful. Dr. Alonso, I'm going to put you on the spot. What would your recommendation be of the three options?
I would recommend option number 2, which is to extend, allow or authorize us to extend the contract for the following 2 years, which is 1 year at a time.
Okay, and maybe at that point in time, it would be time to get a new.
That's correct. Well, at that point in time, we would have to.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
We'd have to.
After 2 years.
okay, I move that we do option number 2. No, you've already got a motion. don't
That's
you?
okay. I'll remove it. You go ahead.
Draw it? Okay, with motions withdrawn. Go ahead.
All right.
We have
Option 2.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second for that we go with option number 2. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Chairman, can I, if I may, ask for a couple of minutes to make an announcement? I should have made it during the Deputy Commissioner's report, but I was putting it off hoping that I would not have to make it. And this is to announce the imminent departure of one of our staff who, as timely as this is, we've been talking about the clean audits and the good work that the agency has been subject to audit in the last 6 or 7 years. And most of that is the results of a person who will be leaving us for bigger and better things here pretty soon. Of course, I'm talking about our Associate Assistant Commissioner. Did I get that right, or is it Assistant Associate? I don't remember her title, but anyway, Susan Corrine will be leaving the agency at the end of this month. She has been mainly responsible, either directly or indirectly, for much of the hard work and the good work that we have been recognized for. We will miss her, but I want to publicly acknowledge the contributions that she has made for this agency and thank her for her service to the coordinating board. Susan, we will miss you, but thank you for what you have done.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you, Arturo. This concludes the Agency Operations Committee. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? No. No? Okay, we're going to stay.
Actually, Janelle, I've been thinking about this. Let's make a motion, second it, and then each of us vote no, so that he'll have to break the tie.
I'll have to work on
At
that.
least get to vote.
Oh, no.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The meeting's adjourned.